Balance.
Yet another successor ascended, this time Erno Giro.
I think they were tired of being a Russian satellite and they wanted the Russians out.
This constant change of leadership and the clear Russian intervention was disconcerting for the Hungarians, and throughout 1955 and culminating in the Hungarian Revolution in 1956, a desire for political freedom grew.
I was in the United States Army, stationed at the European Theater headquarters just outside of Paris. I was a private and a file clerk in the central file room. During October and November, I was a clerk in the central files. We filed all of the correspondence coming into the theater headquarters.
On October 19, 1956, word came into Budapest that an anti-Soviet movement in Poland, led by Władysław Gomulka, had been successful.
The Poles, just a few months earlier, had made demands to the Russians, and the Russians had conceded many of their demands. So it looked like maybe the Russians were loosening their grip on the satellite countries. That influenced the Hungarians to make comparable demands for reform. They thought that if the Poles had gotten away with it, they might too.
In addition, a radio program called Radio Free Europe, independent but sponsored heavily by the United States CIA, had been consistently broadcasting inflammatory remarks about a potential Hungarian revolution.
Radio Free Europe had been encouraging not only the Hungarians, but the Poles and the Czechs and everybody else behind the Iron Curtain to throw the Russians out. I think it was trying to encourage actions like the Hungarian uprising.
Not only did these radio programs give advice on tactics for killing Soviets, programs gave such promises as, quote, if the Soviet troops really attack Hungary, the pressure upon the government of the United States to send military help will be irresistible. In short, the Hungarians had every reason to believe that their protest would succeed. On October 23, 1956, Hungarian students marched peacefully and were shortly joined by workers and civilians, demanding a multi-party system, free elections, and the removal of Soviet troops, among other things.
And they marched on Radio Budapest. And as they marched, more people joined and more people joined. And by the time they got to Radio Budapest, there may have been more than 100,000 of them. A delegation asked to go in so that they could broadcast their demands for reform. They went in and the secret police arrested them. The mob tried to rescue them, and the secret police fired on the mob, killing a number of them. And then things just went out of hand, and the mob turned into a real mob, and they started attacking the secret police and Russians and everybody, and it turned into a full-scale revolution.
Rákosi then called the once popular Imre Nagy in to control the now violent and out-of-hand protests. On October 27, 1956, a new Hungarian government was formed, with Nagy as its leader, and Hungary pulled out of the Warsaw Pact. A ceasefire and temporary peace was negotiated with the Soviets, and on October 30th, Soviet troops withdrew. It seemed as though victory had been won for the Hungarians. The capitalist world, too, rejoiced, for although Hungary was still a communist state, a major blow had been dealt the Soviet Union.
The Parisians were delighted. They were almost ecstatic because they had been scared to death of the Russians for years, and this, they hoped, was beginning the crumbling of the Iron Curtain.
But that was exactly what the Soviet Union was afraid of. On November 4, 1956, Soviet tanks rolled back into Hungary and crushed the fledgling Nagy government with brutal force. The rebels tried to defend their newly won freedom, but the Soviet force was too great. As it became clear that the Hungarians were unable to defend themselves, they appealed to the West for assistance, aid that they believed they had been promised by Radio Free Europe and that was now essential to their survival. When the Russian general Tavarish entered Hungary, the situation became desperate.
I saw all of the incoming communications from Radio Budapest. And they started off saying, when you come in, please bring the following medical supplies. We are in desperate need. And they continued like that for several hours, and then slowly they shifted from when you come in to if you come in, or please send us. It was really heartbreaking to watch the change in tone of those messages as the Hungarians realized we had left them out to dry.